10 years ago, I walked into my apartment to find my twin sister Celeste in bed with my boyfriend of 3 years. But that betrayal was nothing compared to what happened next. When I exposed her affair, my parents chose her side and disowned me completely. They claimed I was lying jealous and vindictive. I lost my family, my home, and my entire support system in one devastating blow. What I discovered later about why they believed her over me changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Hey everyone, before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. If stories about karma and family drama get your heart racing, like mine does, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this tale of revenge will blow your mind. Trust me, you will want to see how this unfolds. My name is Serafina, and I need to take you back to when I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, and completely naive about the people I trusted most. Celeste and I were identical twins, born just 3 minutes apart, but we could not have been more different in personality. Where I was studious and reserved, she was bold and charismatic. Our parents, Margaret and Robert, always seemed to favor her outgoing nature over my quiet determination. I had been dating Marcus for 3 years. We met during our sophomore year of college, and I genuinely believed he was the love of my life. Marcus was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: ambitious, handsome, and charming. He had just started his career in finance while I was working as a junior graphic designer at a small marketing firm. We had been talking about moving in together permanently and possibly getting engaged after I saved enough money for a decent apartment. That Tuesday evening in March changed everything. I had been working late on a particularly challenging project for a new client, and my boss finally let me leave around 8 p.m. I was exhausted but excited to surprise Marcus at my apartment. We had planned to have dinner together, but I had texted him earlier saying I would be late. He responded that he would wait for me and maybe order takeout. I climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment, fumbling with my keys while balancing my laptop bag and a bottle of wine I had picked up as an apology for being late. The hallway was dimly lit, and I noticed that the light under my door seemed brighter than usual. I assumed Marcus had turned on all the lamps while waiting for me. The moment I opened the door, I heard sounds that made my blood run cold. Soft moaning and the unmistakable creaking of my bed coming from my bedroom. My heart started pounding as I dropped my bags in the entryway, the wine bottle hitting the floor with a dull thud, but miraculously not breaking. I crept toward my bedroom, each step feeling like I was walking through quicksand. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see movement on my bed. My hands were shaking as I pushed the door open wider, and the sight that greeted me will be burned into my memory forever. There was Marcus, the man I loved and trusted completely, with Celeste underneath him. My own sister, my identical twin. They were so lost in their passion that they did not even notice me standing in the doorway, watching my entire world collapse in real time. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds trying to process what I was seeing. My mind kept rejecting the reality in front of me. This had to be a nightmare. This could not be happening. But the sounds, the sight, the sick feeling in my stomach confirmed that this was horribly, devastatingly real. Finally, I found my voice. "What the hell is going on here?" I screamed, my voice cracking with emotion. They both froze and turned toward me. The look on Marcus's face was pure panic, but what shocked me even more was Celeste's expression. She did not look embarrassed or ashamed. She looked annoyed, as if I had interrupted something she felt entitled to enjoy. "Serafina, I can explain." Marcus started scrambling to cover himself with my sheets, Explain what? I shouted, tears streaming down my face. Explain how you are sleeping with my sister in my own bed. Explain how long this has been going on. Celeste slowly sat up, pulling the sheet around herself with an almost casual indifference that made my stomach turn. "Oh, come on, Sarah," she said, using the childhood nickname that now felt like poison in my ears. "You had to know this was going to happen eventually." "What do you mean I had to know?" I could barely breathe. The betrayal was suffocating me. "Marcus and I have chemistry," she continued with a shrug that showed absolutely no remorse. "We have had chemistry since the day you introduced us. You are just too boring for someone like him. He needs someone who can match his energy, someone who understands what he really wants." Marcus looked back and forth between us, clearly trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. "Serafina, please let me explain. This just happened. It does not mean anything." "Just happened?" I laughed bitterly. "You just happened to end up naked in my bed with my sister. How long has this been going on?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. This was not a one-time mistake. This was an ongoing affair happening right under my nose in my own space. 6 months. Celeste finally said, her voice matter-of-fact. "We have been seeing each other for 6 months. And honestly, Sarah, he has been so much happier with me than he ever was with you." 6 months. Half a year of lies, of pretending to love me while he was sleeping with my sister. Half a year of family dinners where Celeste would smile at me across the table, knowing she was betraying me in the worst possible way. I felt like I was going to be sick. I ran to my bathroom and barely made it to the toilet before I started retching. Behind me, I could hear them getting dressed and talking in hushed tones. When I finally composed myself enough to come out, they were both fully clothed and sitting on my couch as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk about this rationally," Marcus said, having apparently decided that playing the reasonable card was his best strategy. "Rationally." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want to talk rationally about the fact that you have been cheating on me with my own sister for 6 months. "Look, Serafina," Celeste interrupted. "Marcus and I are in love. Real love. What you two had was never real. It was just comfortable for him until he found something better." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. This was my sister, my twin, the person who was supposed to understand me better than anyone in the world. And she was looking at me with complete indifference, as if my pain meant nothing to her. That night, I made the decision that would change my life forever. I was going to expose them both, no matter what it cost me. I had no idea that the cost would be everything I held dear. The next morning, I woke up on my couch feeling like I had been hit by a truck. Marcus and Celeste had left the night before after I told them both to get out of my apartment, but not before Celeste had the audacity to suggest that I was overreacting and that we could work something out, like some kind of twisted family arrangement. I called in sick to work something I had never done unless I was genuinely ill, and spent the morning trying to figure out my next move. My first instinct was to call my parents and tell them what had happened. Surely they would be as horrified as I was by Celeste's betrayal. Surely they would support me and help me figure out how to move forward. I was so wrong. I drove to my childhood home, a beautiful colonial in the suburbs where my parents still lived. Margaret was in her garden tending to her prized roses, while Robert was in his study reading the morning paper. These were the people who had raised me, who had always preached about family loyalty and doing the right thing. I thought they would be my allies in this devastating situation. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you both," I said, my voice still shaky from the previous night's events. They gathered in the living room, and I told them everything. I explained how I had come home to find Marcus and Celeste together, how they admitted the affair had been going on for 6 months, and how completely unremorseful they both had been about the betrayal. The reaction I got was not what I expected. Margaret looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat and avoiding eye contact with me. Robert frowned, but not in the way I thought he would. He looked annoyed, but his annoyance seemed to be directed at me rather than at Celeste. "Are you sure about what you saw?" Margaret asked carefully. I stared at her in disbelief. "Am I sure, Mom, I walked in on them having sex in my bed? There is no room for misinterpretation here." "Well, maybe there is more to the story than you realize," Robert said, his tone suggesting that I was somehow the unreasonable one in this situation. Before I could respond, I heard the front door open and Celeste walked in as if she owned the place. She had always been comfortable in our childhood home, but something about her demeanor that day was different. She moved through the space with a confidence that seemed almost possessive. "Oh, good, you are all here," she said, settling into the armchair that had always been her favorite spot. "I was hoping we could clear this up." "Clear what up?" I demanded. "There is nothing to clear up. You slept with my boyfriend. You betrayed me in the worst possible way." Celeste sighed dramatically as if I was being incredibly tiresome. "Serafina, you are making this so much more complicated than it needs to be. Marcus and I fell in love. These things happen. You cannot control who someone loves." "These things happen?" I was incredulous. "You are my sister. You do not fall in love with your sister's boyfriend behind her back for 6 months. What happened next still haunts me to this day. Instead of supporting me or expressing any outrage at Celeste's behavior, my parents began defending her. "Honey," Margaret said gently, "love is complicated. Maybe if you had been paying more attention to your relationship with Marcus, this would not have happened." I felt like I had been slapped. "Are you seriously blaming me for this?" Robert leaned forward, his expression stern. "We are not blaming you, Serafina, but we think you might be overreacting. Celeste and Marcus are both adults, and if they have feelings for each other, maybe you should try to be understanding." Understanding. I could not believe what I was hearing. "She is my twin sister. She betrayed me. How can you possibly be taking her side in this?" Celeste spoke up, then her voice taking on a tone I had never heard before. It was manipulative and calculated, designed to make me look like the villain in this scenario. "Serafina, you have always been jealous of me," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "You have always resented that things come easier to me, that people like me more naturally. This is just another example of you trying to make yourself the victim, when really, you are just angry that Marcus chose me over you." The words hit me like a physical blow, because there was just enough truth in them to sting. Growing up, Celeste had always been more popular, more socially successful. But I had never thought I was jealous of her. I had always been proud of my sister's achievements and happy to be her quiet, supportive twin. "That is not what this is about," I said, my voice breaking. "This is about betrayal. This is about trust. This is about family loyalty." "Family loyalty?" Robert's voice was cold now. "Where was your family loyalty when you decided to make a scene and embarrass your sister? Where was your family loyalty when you decided to air our private business?" I looked around the room at these 3 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and I realized that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. They were circling the wagons around Celeste, treating me like an outsider in my own family. "I cannot believe this," I said, standing up. "I cannot believe that you are all acting like I am the problem here." Margaret reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Sweetie, maybe you should take some time to think about this. Maybe when you calm down, you will see things differently. Calm down. I was beyond calm at this point. My sister slept with my boyfriend for 6 months, and you want me to calm down? Celeste stood up then, and there was something almost triumphant in her expression. Serafina, Marcus, and I are going to be together whether you like it or not. You can either accept it and try to maintain some relationship with your family, or you can continue to make this difficult for everyone. That was the moment I realized what was really happening. This was not just about Marcus. This was about power. This was about Celeste asserting her dominance and expecting everyone, including me, to fall in line. Fine, I said, my voice deadly quiet. If that is how you all want to play this, then you are about to see just how difficult I can make things. I walked out of that house knowing that my relationship with my family would never be the same. What I did not know was that they were about to make a decision that would cut me out of their lives entirely, and that the reasons behind their choice would prove to be far more sinister than simple favoritism. The war began the next day. I decided that if my family wanted to treat me like the villain, then I would show them what a real villain could accomplish. But first, I needed evidence, allies, and a strategy that would expose not just the affair, but the entire toxic dynamic that had allowed it to flourish. My first call was to my best friend since childhood, Isabella, who had always seen through Celeste's manipulations in ways that others missed. Isabella worked as a paralegal at a prestigious law firm and had a strategic mind that complemented my creative problem-solving skills. I knew something like this would happen eventually, Isabella said when I told her everything. Celeste has always had this entitled attitude about taking whatever she wanted, and your parents have always enabled it. But why are they defending her so aggressively? I asked. It is like they are more upset with me for exposing her than they are with her for the betrayal itself. Isabella was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I think there might be more going on here than just sibling favoritism. Have you ever noticed how your parents react whenever Celeste gets into trouble? They do not just defend her. They go into full damage control mode, like they are protecting something bigger than just her feelings. She was right. Throughout our childhood, whenever Celeste got caught doing something wrong, our parents would not just excuse her behavior. They would actively work to cover it up and minimize the consequences. I had always attributed it to her being the more charismatic twin, but maybe there was something deeper at play. What are you thinking? I asked. I am thinking we need to do some digging into your family's finances and see if there is something your parents do not want exposed. People do not usually cut off their own child unless they are protecting something valuable. That afternoon, I started my investigation in the most obvious place, social media. I began documenting every interaction between Marcus and Celeste, screenshotting flirtatious comments and suspicious timing of their posts. What I found was damning. They had been leaving breadcrumbs of their affair all over the internet for months, hidden in plain sight. There were photos of them at the same locations on the same days, just posted separately. Comments on each other's posts that seemed innocent on the surface, but had romantic undertones when you knew what to look for. Marcus had even liked several of Celeste's more provocative photos, something that would have raised red flags if I had been paying closer attention. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered that Marcus had given me his laptop password months earlier to help him with a presentation for work. I still had access to his cloud storage, and what I found there made my blood run cold. There were not just photos and videos of him with Celeste going back 8 months, not 6, as they had claimed. There were also text message screenshots where they discussed how pathetic I was, how easy it was to deceive me, and most horrifyingly, how they planned to string me along until Marcus was ready to make his move in his career. The messages revealed that this had never been about love. It was about convenience and cruelty. They had been using me as a cover for their affair, while actively mocking me behind my back. Celeste had even sent Marcus photos of me crying after arguments we had about his increasing emotional distance with captions like, "Look how desperate she is," and "This is actually entertaining." But the most devastating discovery was a conversation from just 2 weeks before I caught them where they discussed how they were going to break the news to me. They had been planning to humiliate me publicly to make it seem like I was the problem in the relationship, and that Marcus was justified in leaving me for my superior sister. Armed with this evidence, I made copies of everything and began planning my counterattack. But I needed more than just proof of their cruelty. I needed to understand why my parents were so determined to protect Celeste at my expense. That is when I called my grandmother. My father's mother, Eleanor, had always been more perceptive than the rest of the family gave her credit for. She lived in a retirement community about an hour away, and I had always felt closer to her than to my parents. She had a way of seeing through people's facades that came from decades of observing human nature. "Grandmother, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," I said when I visited her that weekend. "Of course, dear. What is troubling you?" I told her about the affair and my parents' reaction, watching her face carefully for any signs of surprise. What I saw instead was a look of resignation, as if she had been expecting something like this to happen. "Serafina," she said carefully, "there are things about your family that you do not know. Things your parents have worked very hard to keep hidden." "What kind of things?" Eleanor sighed deeply, suddenly looking at every one of her 78 years. "Your parents have been covering up Celeste's behavior for a long time. Much longer than you realize." She told me about incidents from our childhood that I had never known about. Celeste stealing money from other children at school, and my parents quietly paying it back. Celeste vandalizing a neighbor's property and my parents paying for repairs while convincing the neighbors not to press charges. Celeste cheating on major exams in high school, with Margaret somehow getting the evidence destroyed and the accusations dropped. "But why?" I asked. "Why go to such lengths to protect her?" "Because," Eleanor said, her voice heavy with years of carried secrets, "Celeste is not your biological twin." The words hit me like a lightning bolt. "What do you mean she is not my biological twin?" "Your mother had fertility issues when she was trying to conceive. She became pregnant with you through IVF, but the pregnancy was difficult and dangerous. When you were born, you were premature and very sick. The doctors told your parents that you might not survive." Eleanor paused, choosing her words carefully. "Margaret's sister, your Aunt Catherine, had given birth to a baby girl just 2 days before you were born. Catherine was unmarried and struggling with addiction. She could not care for the baby." I felt the room spinning around me as the implications of what she was saying began to sink in. "Your parents made an arrangement. Catherine signed over custody of her daughter to your parents, and they decided to raise both babies as twins. They thought it would be easier than explaining the complicated family situation. Everyone just assumed you were fraternal twins who happened to look very similar." "So Celeste is actually my cousin?" "Yes. And Catherine has been receiving money from your parents ever since, supposedly for her discretion about the arrangement. But over the years, it has become more like blackmail. Catherine threatens to expose the truth whenever she needs money, and your parents pay her to keep quiet." Everything suddenly made horrible, perfect sense. My parents had not just been protecting Celeste from consequences. They had been protecting themselves from the exposure of a decades-long lie. They could not afford to let Celeste be seen as anything other than perfect, because any scrutiny of her behavior might lead to questions about our family structure. "But why tell me this now?" I asked. Eleanor took my hand. "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because I think it is time for this family to stop living a lie. Your parents have sacrificed your well-being to protect their secret for too long." As I drove home from my grandmother's house, I realized that I now had the ammunition I needed to bring my entire family's house of cards tumbling down. But I also realized that using this information would have consequences that went far beyond just getting revenge on Marcus and Celeste. The question was I prepared to destroy everything my family had built to get the justice I deserved? As it turned out, they were about to make that decision much easier for me. Armed with the devastating truth about my family's decades-long deception, I knew I had to be strategic about my next move. But Celeste and my parents forced my hand sooner than I anticipated. 3 days after my conversation with Eleanor, I received a certified letter that made my blood boil. It was from a lawyer representing my parents demanding that I cease all harassment of Celeste and Marcus, return any stolen property belonging to them, and sign a non-disclosure agreement about private family matters. The letter also informed me that I was no longer welcome in my childhood home and that my parents were officially disowning me. They were trying to silence me legally while cutting me out of their lives entirely. What they did not realize was that they had just handed me the perfect opportunity to expose everything. I immediately called Isabella, who connected me with her boss, a senior partner at her law firm, who specialized in family law and fraud cases. Attorney Michael Rodriguez was fascinated by my story, especially when I showed him the evidence I had gathered, and Eleanor's willingness to testify about the adoption fraud. "This is not just about a family dispute," he explained during our meeting. "Your parents have been committing fraud for over 20 years. They filed false documents claiming you and Celeste were biological twins, which affects everything from medical records to insurance claims. They have also been paying what amounts to extortion money to Catherine, which could be considered conspiracy and money laundering." "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means you have grounds for a civil lawsuit for fraud, emotional distress, and potentially financial damages. More importantly, if you want to pursue criminal charges, the district attorney would be very interested in this case." That evening, I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to expose the entire web of lies, not just for my own vindication, but because I realized that my family's willingness to destroy me, to protect their secret, meant they were capable of much worse. I started by creating a comprehensive document that laid out everything: the affair, the family's reaction, the financial fraud, the adoption lies, and the decades of cover-ups. I included screenshots of Marcus and Celeste's cruel messages, photos of financial documents Eleanor had saved, and a timeline of every major incident where my parents had protected Celeste from consequences. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I posted the entire story on social media, tagging not just my family and friends, but also my parents' employer, their social clubs, and their church community. I included enough evidence to make the claims credible while protecting Eleanor's privacy by not revealing her as my source. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with calls and messages from people who had witnessed Celeste's behavior over the years, but had never connected the dots. Former classmates came forward with stories of her cheating, stealing, and manipulating others while our parents covered for her. Neighbors shared incidents they had witnessed, but never reported because my parents had convinced them to keep quiet. But the most shocking response came from Catherine herself. She called me directly, her voice shaky and emotional. "Serafina, I have been waiting for someone to finally tell the truth about what your parents did to both of us." It turned out that Catherine had not been blackmailing my parents as Eleanor believed. Instead, my parents had been using the threat of cutting off her support payments to control her behavior and keep her quiet. They had convinced her that if anyone found out about the adoption arrangement, she would face legal consequences for abandoning her child. "They told me that if I ever tried to contact Celeste or tell anyone the truth, they would have me arrested for fraud," Catherine explained. "I have been living in fear for 20 years, watching them raise my daughter to be just as manipulative and cruel as they are." Catherine agreed to meet with Attorney Rodriguez and provide a full statement about the adoption arrangement, and my parents' ongoing threats. She also revealed something that made the situation even more sinister. My parents had been claiming both Celeste and me as dependents on their taxes and insurance, essentially double-dipping on benefits, while knowing that Celeste was not legally their biological child. Meanwhile, my social media post was being shared widely, and local news outlets began picking up the story. The combination of family drama, financial fraud, and decades-long deception was exactly the kind of story that captured public attention. My parents tried to control the narrative by issuing their own statement claiming that I was having a mental health crisis and that my accusations were the result of jealousy and instability. They painted themselves as concerned parents trying to protect their family from a disturbed daughter. But their strategy backfired spectacularly when Marcus made the mistake of trying to defend himself publicly. He posted a long, self-righteous statement on social media explaining how he had fallen in love with Celeste and how I was being unreasonable about a natural progression of feelings. The public reaction was swift and brutal. People began digging into Marcus's background and discovered that this was not the first time he had cheated on a girlfriend with her sister or close friend. A pattern emerged of him specifically targeting women with vulnerable family dynamics, using their relationships to gain access to their sisters or friends. 3 other women came forward with similar stories, and suddenly, Marcus was not just a cheating boyfriend, but a predator who deliberately destroyed families for his own entertainment. The pressure became too much for Celeste. In a desperate attempt to save herself, she made the worst possible decision. She tried to throw our parents under the bus. In a tearful video posted to her own social media accounts, she claimed that she had only recently learned about the adoption arrangement and that our parents had been forcing her to keep quiet about it. She painted herself as another victim of their manipulation, claiming that they had threatened to disown her if she ever told me the truth. But Celeste's lies were easily disproven when Catherine came forward with text messages showing that Celeste had known about her biological parentage for years and had been using it to manipulate our parents into giving her more money and support. The final blow came when the IRS announced they were opening an investigation into my parents' tax filings based on the evidence of fraud that had been presented. Local prosecutors also confirmed they were reviewing the case for potential criminal charges. My family's perfect facade was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. But the personal cost of this victory was about to become clear, and I had to decide whether justice was worth losing my family forever. The aftermath of my public exposure was more devastating than even I had anticipated. Within a week, my parents' entire social and professional world had collapsed around them. Robert was placed on administrative leave from his position as a senior accountant at a prestigious firm while they conducted their own internal investigation into his integrity. The company could not afford to keep an employee who had been involved in decades-long fraud, regardless of whether it was personal rather than professional. Margaret was quietly asked to step down from her volunteer positions at several charitable organizations where she had been a prominent board member. The revelation that she had been living a lie for over 20 years raised serious questions about her judgment and trustworthiness. Their church community, where they had been pillars of the congregation for decades, began distancing themselves from the family. The pastor even called me personally to express his shock and disappointment at my parents' behavior and to offer his support during this difficult time. But the most immediate consequence was financial. The IRS investigation froze several of their accounts, while auditors reviewed 20 years of tax returns. The legal fees for defending against both criminal charges and my civil lawsuit were mounting rapidly. They were forced to put their house on the market to cover their expenses. Celeste's world was falling apart just as quickly. The marketing firm where she worked as a social media manager fired her after the scandal began affecting their client relationships. Several clients specifically requested that she be removed from their accounts, because they did not want their brands associated with someone involved in such a public controversy. Marcus lost his job in finance when his employer discovered that several of his colleagues had come forward with complaints about his inappropriate behavior toward their female family members at company events. The pattern of predatory behavior was impossible to ignore once people started connecting the dots. But what happened next showed me just how deep their capacity for cruelty really went. Instead of accepting responsibility for their actions or attempting to make amends, my family launched a coordinated campaign to destroy my credibility and reputation. They hired a public relations firm to spread stories about my supposed mental health issues and history of jealousy toward Celeste. They contacted my employer with fabricated concerns about my stability, claiming that I had been making threats against them and that they feared for their safety. They even filed a restraining order against me, alleging harassment and stalking, despite the fact that I had not contacted them directly since the initial confrontation. The restraining order was particularly vicious because it was designed to make me look unstable and dangerous while preventing me from defending myself publicly. They timed the filing to coincide with a press interview I was scheduled to give, forcing me to cancel and making it appear as though I was avoiding scrutiny. For a terrifying few days, I began to doubt myself. Their campaign was so sophisticated and coordinated that I started to wonder if maybe I really was the villain in this story. Maybe I had gone too far in my quest for justice. Maybe destroying their lives was not worth proving my point. That is when Isabella reminded me of something crucial. I still had one piece of evidence that would prove definitively who was telling the truth. During my investigation, I had secretly recorded several conversations with my parents and Celeste using an app on my phone. In my state, it was legal to record conversations as long as one party consented, which meant the recordings would be admissible in court. The recordings were damning. They included my parents discussing how to manage the fallout from my accusations and Celeste bragging about how easy it had been to manipulate both Marcus and me. Most importantly, they included a conversation where my parents explicitly discussed their knowledge of the adoption fraud and their plan to blame everything on Catherine if the truth ever came out. When Attorney Rodriguez filed these recordings as evidence in our civil case, the effect was immediate and final. There was no way for my family to claim that I was lying or mentally unstable when their own words proved everything I had been saying. The recordings also revealed something that made their behavior even more inexcusable. They had been planning to cut me out of their will long before the affair incident specifically, because they were afraid that I might eventually discover the truth about Celeste's parentage and expose their fraud. Their decision to disown me had not been a reaction to my behavior. It had been a preemptive strike to protect themselves from potential exposure. They had been planning to sacrifice me to protect their secret regardless of what I did or did not do. The public reaction to the recordings was swift and decisive. The few people who had been defending my family or suggesting that there were two sides to every story quickly changed their tune when they heard my parents' callous discussions about destroying my reputation to protect themselves. Local news outlets began referring to the case as a cautionary tale about family secrets and the dangers of enabling bad behavior. I received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of family betrayal and thanking me for having the courage to speak out. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when Celeste finally cracked under the pressure. Faced with mounting legal bills, no job prospects, and the complete collapse of her social support system, she made one final desperate attempt to save herself. She called me directly, violating the restraining order she had helped file against me, and begged me to stop the legal proceedings. "Serafina, please," she sobbed into the phone. "I am sorry. Okay, I am sorry for everything. Can we please just make this stop? I never meant for it to go this far." "You never meant for it to go this far?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "You mean you never meant to get caught?" "No, that is not what I mean. I mean, I never wanted to hurt you this badly. I was just being selfish." I did not think about how much it would hurt you. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She sounded broken and desperate, nothing like the confident, manipulative person who had destroyed my relationship and my family. But then I remembered the text messages where she had mocked my pain. I remembered her complete lack of remorse when I first caught them together. I remembered how she had tried to paint herself as the victim when the truth came out. "Celeste," I said quietly, "you had 22 years to be my sister. You had countless opportunities to tell me the truth, to treat me with basic decency, to show me even the smallest amount of loyalty or love. Instead, you chose cruelty at every turn. The only thing you are sorry about is that you are finally facing consequences for your actions." I hung up the phone and immediately called Attorney Rodriguez to report the violation of the restraining order. It was the final nail in the coffin of any sympathy I might have had for the people who had raised me. 2 years have passed since that devastating phone call from Celeste, and the transformation in my life has been nothing short of miraculous. The legal battles have concluded, the truth has been fully exposed, and justice has been served in ways I could never have imagined when this nightmare began. The civil lawsuit against my parents resulted in a substantial settlement that covered not only my legal fees, but also compensation for the emotional distress and financial damage their fraud had caused me. More importantly, the court officially recognized that their actions constituted a pattern of abuse and manipulation spanning decades. The criminal charges brought additional vindication. My parents were convicted of tax fraud and conspiracy, receiving probation and hefty fines that wiped out most of their remaining assets. They were also required to pay restitution to the IRS and undergo counseling for their enabling behavior. Celeste faced charges for her role in the conspiracy and for violating the restraining order. She received community service and was required to attend therapy to address her manipulative behaviors. Marcus was not charged criminally, but he faced civil lawsuits from the other women who came forward with similar stories of his predatory relationship patterns. But the legal victories, satisfying as they were, pale in comparison to the personal growth and healing I have experienced over these past 2 years. I discovered that losing my family of origin, as painful as it was, made space for me to build a chosen family based on mutual respect, genuine love, and shared values. Isabella has become more than just a best friend. She is the sister I never really had. Attorney Rodriguez, who became a mentor during the legal proceedings, helped me understand that standing up for myself was not just about personal justice, but about protecting others from similar abuse. Eleanor, my grandmother, became one of my closest allies until her peaceful passing last spring. Before she died, she told me that watching me fight for the truth had been one of the proudest moments of her life. She left me her entire estate, along with a letter explaining that she had always known I was the granddaughter who truly carried on the family values of integrity and courage. Catherine and I have developed an unexpected friendship. Meeting her helped me understand that she had been as much a victim of my parents' manipulation as I had been. She has been sober for 3 years now and has rebuilt her life with the same determination that I used to rebuild mine. We both learned that sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we are born into. Professionally, my career has flourished beyond my wildest dreams. The publicity from the case, while initially overwhelming, brought me to the attention of several major marketing firms who were impressed by my strategic thinking and resilience under pressure. I now run my own successful consulting business, helping other people navigate complex family and personal crises. I have also found love again, though it took time for me to trust my judgment about people. David is everything Marcus pretended to be: honest, supportive, and genuinely interested in building a partnership based on equality and respect. He knew about my story before we started dating seriously, and his reaction to it told me everything I needed to know about his character. "You did not just survive that situation," he told me early in our relationship. "You transformed it into something that made you stronger and helped other people. That takes incredible courage." The most unexpected outcome of this entire ordeal has been the number of people who have reached out to share their own stories of family betrayal and manipulation. I have received hundreds of letters and emails from individuals who found the courage to address toxic family dynamics after seeing how my story unfolded. Many of these people have become friends and advocates for changing how society handles family abuse. We have learned that emotional and psychological manipulation within families is far more common than most people realize, and that victims often feel trapped by societal expectations about family loyalty. I now speak regularly at conferences and workshops about recognizing and addressing toxic family patterns. My story has become a case study in several family therapy programs, helping future counselors understand the long-term effects of enabling behavior and the importance of supporting family members who speak out against abuse. As for my biological family, they have largely disappeared from public view. My parents moved to another state after their house was foreclosed upon, and I have heard through mutual acquaintances that they are living quietly, still maintaining their innocence, despite all the evidence against them. Celeste attempted to restart her life in a different city, but her reputation followed her. She has struggled to find stable employment or relationships as background checks and social media searches continue to reveal her involvement in the scandal. I occasionally see her posts on social media where she seems to be trying to reinvent herself as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. I feel no satisfaction in their continued struggles, but I also feel no guilt about the consequences they are facing. They made their choices, and they must live with the results just as I have had to live with the results of their betrayal. The most important lesson I have learned is that justice is not just about punishment. It is about truth healing and creating space for authentic relationships to flourish. By refusing to accept my family's lies and manipulation, I did not just vindicate myself. I broke a cycle of abuse that could have continued for generations. My story has shown me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic people is to hold them accountable for their actions. Enabling bad behavior does not help anyone, least of all the person engaging in that behavior. I want to end by asking all of you who have followed this journey, have you ever found yourself in a situation where family loyalty conflicted with doing what was right? How did you handle the pressure to keep quiet about harmful behavior, just because it involved people you were supposed to love unconditionally? The comments section has become a place where so many of you share your own experiences with family karma and justice, and I read every single one. Your stories remind me daily that I was not alone in facing this kind of betrayal, and that speaking out was the right choice. If my experience has taught you anything, I hope it is that you deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, regardless of blood relation. Please, like this video if my story has helped you think differently about toxic family dynamics, and subscribe for more content about healing from family trauma and building healthy boundaries. Share this story with anyone who might be struggling with similar situations, because sometimes knowing that others have survived and thrived after family betrayal can provide the courage needed to take action. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember that choosing truth over comfort is always the brave choice, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. Sometimes losing the wrong family is exactly what you need to make space for the right one.